Hi guys, I'm Mike G from the War Rapport. 2021 was full of hope and disappointment for Auburn football. With a first-year head coach on the Plains, there was no shortage of headlines around the program. So this holiday season, I've asked some of my friends to join me to take a look back at the top 10 storylines for Auburn football of the year as voted on by you, the fans. Let me bring my friends in. All right, guys. So joining me today is owner and publisher at auburnsports.com, the good-looking guy down here in the tie, G Tate. You guys know C-Dub from the War Rapport. I got Zac Blackerby, host of Locked on Auburn, with me. And over at Infinite Auburn over on YouTube, go check them out. I got Chase. Chase, thanks for joining us, guys. It's been a year. It's been a year for Auburn football. Lots of stuff happening lately, and so we're gonna go ahead and jump right into this. So we asked you guys, the fans, to vote on the top 10 storylines, and we're gonna start with 6 through 10. Coming in at 10, Bryan Harsin chooses Austin Davis as offensive coordinator. A little recency bias here, probably. Number 9, TJ Finley leads epic comeback versus Georgia State. 8, Beau transfers to Oregon. 7, Auburn hires Derek Mason as defensive coordinator. And coming in at number 6, Auburn comes up just a little bit short in the Iron Bowl. So let's start with the most recent storyline here. Austin Davis as offensive coordinator. Interesting choice. JG, I got to ask you, what do you think of this hire? Like, what do we do with this? If you're an Auburn fan, what do you do with this hire?
Well, you can't judge it yet. You just can't, because he's too young and he hasn't really done anything. I mean, he was playing like 3 or 4 years ago, right? So, I mean, seriously,
literally,
the fact that he was hired so quickly after his career ended, like the next day, by a guy like Pete Carroll, who's well known and well respected, he's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame one of these days, says something about his aptitude for sure. So I think what's happening here is Harsin's going to be taking over play calling, and they needed a quarterback with a really high upside is what I think he wanted to fill that position with. And so that's what he got. He got a QB coach who's worked with Russell Wilson, who's played in the league for a while, gives that instant credibility, has a youthful attitude. I'm told he has that vibrant attitude that you would expect him to be good on the recruiting trail. He hasn't done it yet, but I think he will be good at it. And so that's the hole I think he's going to fill. I don't think we can judge him just yet. There's just too much work to be done.
Yeah. Zac, I got to ask you too, man. Listen, what is this? What the possibility of Bryan Harsin calling plays in 2022 due to this hire? Like, what's the feeling around this? I know you have the beat of the fans. You do a lot of interaction with fans. How do people feel about Bryan Harsin possibly calling plays?
I think there's some excitement about it. I'm sure, there's going to be some folks throughout the Auburn fan base that feel, a different way about that. But I think people in general seem to be excited about the upside with his hire than the dynamic of Austin Davis and Bryan Harsin working together. Talked to some folks in Seattle, in the Seahawks media, and there's nothing but respect about Austin Davis. It seems like everybody that this guy works with, like JG was saying, I mean, he's got the respect of Russell. He's got the respect of Pete up there. And it sounds like Russell Wilson's legit upset. Not like that he's angry, but, he wants to continue to be coached by Austin Davis. And so I think that's a positive side. Now, how does that translate from being an NFL QB coach to an offensive coordinator in college? I think that's a big jump for sure. But the fact that it was 10th in this list, I'm a little surprised the recency bias didn't have it a little bit higher.
Yeah, listen, Caesar and Chase, let's talk recruiting here with this hire, right? If you're a young quarterback and you're looking for a college and Russell Wilson's QB coach is now the offensive coordinator at Auburn and you have the chance to be tutored by this guy, what does this do to your prospects that you're trying to get in?
I would think on face value, you look at that and you think as a QB, what's your eventual goal? You want to go to the league, and this guy's been there. I think that's part of what Bryan Harsin had in mind. He wanted somebody he can work with, somebody who will coach up the QBs, but 2, he has what we're seeing from Bryan Harsin is he is shifting to an NFL mindset, and this is only helping and aiding in that shift.
Caesar.
I also think this is kind of like the Nick Eason effect. You bring in a young guy, high energy guy, and I'll never forget the video we saw of Nick Eason coaching in the Senior Bowl when you just saw his personality just ooze out and you just knew he was going to be gold on the recruiting trail. I'm not saying this guy is going to be like Nick Eason, but if he's a young guy, he's relatable to kids. He's played in the NFL. He knows how to get there. Him being a great tutor of QBs, especially being praised by guys from the Seattle Seahawks. Larry Fedora even just praised this guy who coached him at Southern Miss. And so I think that this is going to be a great combination for him to learn how to put together an offense, game plan throughout the week. He's learning from a guy who's cut his teeth on being an offensive coordinator in Brian Harsin. So it's a win-win for both sides. Like JG said, it's going to take time to see how it works out.
Listen, coming in at number 9, TJ Finley leads epic comeback versus Georgia State. Guys, this is a really significant moment in this year. No comeback, possibly no bowl game next week.
I'm a little shocked this one's not higher.
Yeah, and also what an exciting moment that in retrospect was such a big part of the season, but also that seems like forever ago. I mean, so much has happened since that drive happened,
We must be embarrassed by this moment. We ranked it so low.
I think because it ended up to be a net 0 for TJ Finley, right? Like he didn't start after that. He barely saw the field until Beau got hurt. I think that's why this moment is so low, but it's almost like a forgotten moment in this season. Like I'm shocked that this was so low, but we had a lot of respondents. We had a few hundred respondents, and they all just they said, "Hey, it makes the list, but not super up there."
I would say to this game set into motion a lot of things, right? Beau's play changed drastically after this game. Number one, number two, we had a coach get fired after this game, which the last time that happened, that spelled disaster for Auburn when Tony Franklin got fired midway through the season, and we remember how that season ended up. So it was a lot of questions. We were relieved that we avoided disaster, but there were so many questions leaving this game about the future of Auburn's offense. What's up with the receivers? What's up with playing rotate? We had a lot of questions about what was going on, and we began to panic. Thankfully, the next week we felt good after going into Baton Rouge and ending what was it seems like a never-ending streak of losses to LSU. But this was a big game that set off a lot of questions and a lot of interesting stuff that happened in the coming days after that game.
Yeah, before we move on, JG, this was the game that we found out how important Zacoby McClain was to our run defense.
Right. Yeah, he's a pretty good player, a very active player. As far as the TJ thing goes, this is the game we thought was going to be this huge moment for TJ. Oh my gosh, Auburn's really got something special in their backup. And then when he had that opportunity when Beau got hurt, he was just kind of okay, I guess, maybe-ish. And so maybe you kind of look back on it now and say, oh, it was kind of a flash in the pan. And I think maybe the way TJ played late in the season lowered this down the list. Whereas if he had been really good when Beau went down, maybe this ends up, I don't know, seeming like it was in keeping with a really good season instead of being an outlier. I don't know. It was an incredible performance, though, for that, whatever it was, a drive, or I can't even remember now.
It was end of the third quarter. He came in at the end of the third quarter.
Okay, so a couple drives, yeah.
Yeah.
But that last drive, man, when you're what was the win percentage there? 0.5%? I mean, they were done.
Pretty epic.
And it's fascinating because JG, I mean, you mentioned that, but those few drives before the offense didn't do anything. But man, that last drive, he pulled it all together.
Yeah,
he did. Well, speaking of Bo Nix, coming in number 8 is Bo Nix transfers to Oregon. Guys, I was blown away that this wasn't in the top 3. So this might be a little bit of, we'll acknowledge, but we're still angry. But I want to go back to JG on this one. Beau took his ball and went west.
Yeah, he did. And I have to say, I've been covering Auburn, I think 20-something years now. I'm not sure I've ever seen a player so polarizing, particularly somebody who wasn't ever in trouble. He wasn't some guy that got in trouble, like Clifton Robinson got in some trouble off the field and that got everybody fired up. He's a clean living dude, and everybody was just mad about or loved him because of his fiery attitude on the field For me, it was just like I thought it got away from him, and to me, it kind of soured me on him a little bit as a player because some dudes like Michael Jordan, who's the GOAT in basketball, when he gets really pissed off, like he's a better player. Like I think he plays better mad.
Yeah.
I thought Kobe Bryant played better mad. A lot of guys do. I don't think Bo Nix plays well mad. I think he gets mad and he just drops off. And I think that was very frustrating for people in general. That's all. It's weird because Bo's a good dude and he obviously loves Auburn, and I think he chose to go a long way away on purpose.
Yeah, guys, jump in here, man. Bo Nix transfers to Oregon.
I think that this was a smart move for him overall. And I said from the start, when all this started coming up, is that he wanted to go somewhere where he could increase his draft stock overall. And I think he can do that in the Pac-12 because look at what the Pac-12 is. But two, Oregon's a good team. So he wants to go play for a school where they're going to be a contender, but two, where he's not playing in the SEC West. He's not getting beat up week in and week out. But going back to what JG was saying, what do you think was the overall or the main factor that caused Bo Nix to be such a polarizing figure at Auburn?
That's an interesting question because, listen, my freshman year at Auburn was 2001. I admittedly didn't watch a lot of Auburn before that, but, I filmed a lot of Auburn after that. And people were so split on Bo Nix. You either loved him and he was the ultimate Auburn guy, or you were just frustrated to all hell that he had not reached his potential yet. But I tell you, the reaction that we saw at the end, and you guys can chime in here, I think that his whoever Bo's PR people did a terrible job. And charting this whole thing out, like
the way he handled leaving is like the perfect example of how to not do things. I mean, including going on radio shows and just kind of purposely leading things one way, the narrative one way, and then he drops the video late on a Sunday evening, and just the optics, it looked like he's like looking off to the side, clearly reading something.
It looked like a hostage video. It looked like somebody was holding a gun off camera.
He's wearing a black hoodie with a black backdrop. Yeah. Like, what are you doing? Are you okay? Blink twice if you need help.
You love Auburn. Yeah, like, wow, man. I don't know, man. Like, that video was I was taken back by that video. Yeah. And for a guy who loved Auburn, it seems pretty emotionless, I think. But
I think that's kind of who he is, though.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I didn't like the optics of it. I think that this all started with Beau now he was asked the question, are you returning the next year? I forgot who asked him. And he said, I'm evaluating all my options or something like that. Right. I should have brought a drink for this, like JG. And after that, it was kind of radio silence. And because of NIL, he had to keep getting in front of the camera every week.
Yeah. Right. What do you mean he had to?
He had to do it.
This was orchestrated, Mike G. Come on.
Okay. All right.
The first time he was asked, though, was pregame. CBS asked him right before the Iron Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
He has that answer. And I remember watching that and being like, wait, what?
Twitter went crazy after that. Twitter definitely went crazy after that. And it just became much more than perhaps what it should have been. And I think with someone like Beau who came in with so much promise, I think a lot of people, you want to buy into this story because Beau actually is an amazing story, being a son of a beloved quarterback who had success here in Patrick Nix. He's coming along. They showed the pictures of him at the national championship game that we won with Cam, and he's a little kid. I mean, the story was set up. He beat Oregon, and you had people who are gung-ho with the story. And then the ups and downs of his career, the way it ended, yes, you're going to have people on both sides of the fence when it comes to Beau in terms of still loving Beau. Some people kind of bitter about how things ended, but that's the story of Bo Nix. That's pretty much sums up his tenure here at Auburn.
Yeah, well, listen, we got two more on this list, 7 and 6. 7 is Auburn hires Derek Mason. Now, this was a hire in the offseason. One of the big questions after Brian Harsin got hired was who are his coordinators going to be? So he brings in two former SEC guys. We kind of went on a wild ride this year with the defense. There were stretches of great play and there were stretches of head-scratching play. here. I mean, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was a stretch of almost 8 quarters where they had not allowed an offensive touchdown.
That is correct.
Over like 2 or 3 games. And then there was Mississippi State, or, the first 3 quarters of the Iron Bowl and then the last quarter of the Iron Bowl, right? Like a lot of people were calling for Derek Mason's head, and then other people were, pleading for patience with what we saw this year. So, guys, Derek Mason, how do we feel about him after this season?
Well, I think people want him fired. That's a joke. And I know you're talking. I know there's people out there, Mike G, who at the time, maybe not now, but at the time, particularly in the wake of the Mississippi State loss, wanted him to go. And that's crazy because he needed to. Do I think he called a great game? No, I don't. But I like what he did with this defense. I thought he maximized some of these dudes. Not Owen, but Jacoby I thought was very active, and I think he got the most out of him. And obviously Roger McCreary is going to go to the NFL, and barring injury, he's going to play a long time and make a lot of money. And he's going to be like Carlos Rogers. So there's some good things. And Derek Mason is a very spirited guy. He's a very good recruiter. He's a great guy to have on your staff and in your building because he's insanely positive and he's insanely energetic. I think he's one of the great pieces of this coaching puzzle. I think they have a lot of good coaches, but I think he's as good as they have, and I think he's tremendous. That's just my take on that.
Guys, Derek Mason.
Yeah, I think what he did with some of the guys on the defensive front, I mean, you got to love what he did with Colby Wooden. I think he elevated his game and kind of said, hey, with a kind of a more versatile front, he's going to be more attractive to NFL teams whenever he decides to go pro. And then guys like TD Moultrie, I know he missed some time in the middle of the season, but I think the way that he played is, once again, TD Moultrie kind of saved his Auburn career to some extent.
Yeah, Chase.
I think with recruiting, Mason made a ton of sense, and it's easy to point to single games and be unhappy with how the defense played in certain games, like the Mississippi State game. But then if you look at most of the Iron Bowl, how can you be upset with that? We kept Bama to nothing for how long? Three quarters?
3.5 quarters, really. It felt like.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you can be upset with that. But when you isolate certain games, it's easy to get upset. It's easy to get mad and get caught up in all that. But looking at the whole season, he did a lot of good for Auburn, and he, like everybody else said, he got the most out of guys that he could.
Yeah.
The Mississippi State game, though, like, that was a disaster.
It's an outlier.
Sure, you certainly hope so, right? You certainly hope so moving forward, but it wasn't all in the defense. The offense, the management of should Beau have been in as long as he was. I mean, there was a lot of things you can kind of point at and say, okay, Auburn did not do that well against Mississippi State.
Yeah, I will say before we move on, that quarterback did that to a lot of teams last year. The lowest yardage output Will Rogers was held to last year was 292 yards versus NC State. Whew. He shredded everybody for at least 300. So,
yeah, and I think too with Derek Mason, a lot of people loved this hire when it was made because a lot was made of what he did when he was at Stanford, and I think he got a lot of respect for his defenses there. I think what people failed to realize was that his defense was so much different than Kevin Steele's. And I think a lot of people were used to that attacking defense, man press coverage, and Mason likes to do things a little differently. And I think it was not a sexy defense, but it was effective, and it got a lot of use of our personnel. And I think at the end of the day, you can reduce Auburn's poor play to really just 2 halves throughout the whole season. The first half of Georgia State and the second half of Mississippi State. Everywhere else, the defense has been solid. But if you're allowing the opposition to move the change between the 20s, that's going to frustrate fans, and it's going to give this appearance that the defense is regressing when at the end of the day, they're still keeping opponents out of the end zone, which is the name of the game. Yeah.
Listen, rounding out the first 5 here, coming in number 6, Auburn comes up short in the Iron Bowl. I don't know how much I have to say about this. I watched it live. It was brutal. So we've kind of rounded into this talking about Derek Mason, but they turned in what a lot of people felt was like their best defensive performance of the year. Sans a couple drives by Bryce Young and overtime. But man, they gritted that out against the eventual number one team in the nation and number one seed in the playoff, and really gave Bama a run for their money in this one. It was great, but the offensively, I felt like, despite Beau not being able to play, it epitomized the struggles and inconsistency that Auburn had on offense all year. Really, right? It just wasn't going to get better with TJ.
It's not a defensive problem. I mean, we can talk all day about how some people could say they spit the bit there second half of the fourth quarter and then into overtime, but whether they did or they didn't hold. Alabama did not get a lot done. If you look at it on the whole, the offense has got to do more. And I think, as you said, Mike G, it epitomized the problems they had on offense where they can't get it. They can't move anybody. And Alabama's a particularly tough team to move, not just necessarily because they have great players up front, because I think Georgia has better players up front, but it's the third team guys at Alabama. It's the second team guys at Alabama. You never get a break. It's always some dude who's going to push on you and make it very hard. And then eventually you just saw Auburn just could not run the football. And then people start getting on Tank Bigsby.
Right.
He's
Go
the
down,
problem.
Tank.
When you get down to Tank Bigsby's the problem, you need to seriously look at yourself and what sport you're following. It's time to look into curling. Stuff gets me fired up, man.
I'm Googling curling here off to the side.
Yeah, you need to. It's fun. It's a fun sport, but it's chill.
It's the best winter sport.
Guys, Iron Bowl, Auburn comes up short.
I think it hurts, but I think when you look at it, I think JG nailed it there. Over the course of 60 minutes, Alabama just wears you down. And the fact that Auburn was able to do what no other teams have really been able to do is stop Bryce Young, the eventual Heisman winner. I think that says a lot, especially when you look at Georgia the following week against Alabama. The historic defense, the best defense in history, ? They weren't able to do what Auburn did a week prior, and Auburn kind of put some stuff on tape on what to do. So, it's not a moral victory by any stretch of the imagination, but what a game. 4 overtimes, historic Iron Bowl. What a game.
Oh, man. Yeah. Caesar and Chase closing out.
I think even though the outcome was not what we wanted, it was still easy to be proud as an Auburn fan because, just like JG said, our defense was incredible. They did what they had to do. But ultimately, this game was a chance for Mike Bobo to save his job. And based on what we saw and what happened afterwards, this is where he lost it.
Yeah.
Caesar, closing thoughts?
Yeah. To me, and I echo Chase's sentiments, I was proud because there were certain things that were question marks that were answered. We got a serious pass rush on Bama's offense. And granted, their O-line was questionable all year. We saw what we were able to do in terms of getting sacks on Bryce Young, and we saw what Georgia was unable to do the following week. So it was just impressive to see that we are able to generate a pass rush. And that was something that has made our defense very effective throughout the season. So I was proud of that. And it just highlighted, again, to your point, Mike G, the issues that we've seen all season long and the inconsistencies on offense, running the ball and being able to score when needed.
Yeah.
Hey, man, I got a hot take before we get any further, though, Mike. I want to say something. You guys, we talked about earlier. We talked about Cornelius Williams getting fired after the Georgia State game, and the wideouts were not playing well, so I get it. But I would make the argument that if you're firing a coach based on how his group's playing, you would have fired Will Friend first, and I don't understand why that didn't happen.
Hey, that's as hot a take as you're going to get.
I'm just saying, and I would not be surprised to learn later on that those conversations did, in fact, occur.
Oh, man, listen. Well, JG coming in with the fire as always. You guys voted. We heard you. These were the top 10 storylines of the 2021 season, 10 through 6. Brian Harsin chooses Austin Davis as offensive coordinator. TJ Finley and his epic comeback versus Georgia State. Bye-bye, Beau. Auburn hires Derek Mason, and just a really disappointing